so. Only one package with one single DVD for this week. This could be Amazon slowing down on shipping on essential stuff. And if so, I'll have to figure out what my video next week will be. I don't want it to be one of my VR chat tutorial things. Just because I've recorded the video for one, but there's been a new VR chat update to a new version of Unity, and I've got stuff to do there, but... Anyways, we have Fire Force, which is hiding a shiny person. And since we only have the one, let's take it off. Fortunately, I will have a lot of watched anime to talk about. And then this TV-14 feels like it can be taken off as well. Okay, good. Get these here. And instead of tossing them aside here, I mean, this is just one DVD from the creator of Soul Eater. Yeah, okay, that explains why he looks familiar. So, okay, we've got regions A and B. I see English dub. That's just kind of expected. Special features, Anime Expo 2019 Q&A with person, speed drawing video by person, probably the creator of Soul Eater maybe, and inside the episodes. And then this is the same, but I have to say that, you know, that's kind of nice. The shininess of the... They're not exactly belts. It's being stubborn. Let's grab this and put it aside here, and fail to grab the plastic. Oh gosh, this is getting annoying. There we go. The fucking hell is this bullshit? Okay. Now this plastic is like refusing to come off of the rest of it. It's just breaking really easily. I'm having trouble grabbing. Come on, this is bullshit. There we go. Fuck you. Okay. So I open it up. And I'm guessing they're firefighters, but I don't know what the appeal of it would be beyond that. I would guess it, you know, given that this is from the makers of Soul Eater, or the creator of it, it's probably not designed to be a... I'm just trying to see if that's... Anyways, up to 12 episodes. Up to 12 episodes. I get the impression that there's some superpower involved here with their firefighting abilities. Although, I think I saw that in an advertisement, but it's been so long since I've seen that ad that it's so vague. Anyways, this should be like a Season 1, Part 1. Yes. That's about right. Anyways, well, that wraps up this part really quick. Here's this week's Anime DVD Collection update. Alright, so like I said, I had, so, I mentioned I had watched the first episode of Release of Spyce, and I watched up to the third episode, you know, so I watched 2 more episodes, you know, that's usually a good cutoff point, and I mentioned the first episode had a kind of interesting energy to it that made me want to go forward. I didn't exactly feel that in episodes 2 and 3. I think the problem is... The first episode didn't make our character out to be like mind-bogglingly awesome, just kind of, oh, that's interesting, she could be useful. But then episode 2 is about ninja stuff, and now she's put through the training, and I guess they kind of explain it in a way that makes it sound like the characters just get put through that training, and that she, the fact that she goes through it isn't anything special per se. You know, it's something that requires effort on her part, but it's no longer really about her as in, well, why did they approach her? You know, they approached her because she seemed to have better sensory skills than you would expect. So you would think, did they have some idea on how to use it? But then it's like episodes 2 and 3, it was just like her training, and then, oh, they're deploying her and just expecting her to come up with, you know, all these spy good ideas on the spot, kinda. And of course she messes it up, and it's all about how she's supposed to mess it up, but it's not necessarily bad, but it's weird, and it's not bad, it's just losing. It's like there was a little bit about where she does look at character and say, oh no, what they're saying about this is true or something like that, but it didn't feel like they set things up for that. So it's just kind of like she's just another face, kinda, and it's not bad. There was some interesting things about it, but it didn't make me as excited to continue going. In fact, I you know, watched something else, but you know, so overall it could be good, but it takes what it had with the first episode and it kind of stumbles a little bit, maybe. It's not necessarily bad as a series, it's just, you know, I ended up prioritizing other stuff. And now I have Attack on Titan Season 3 here, not because I wait for that to Attack on Titan Season 3, but because, you know, I did start talking about this a little last week, and I figured I might as well finish talking about it this week, because, you know, with my friend, we watched the second disc of Season 3 Part 2. And it's really interesting because I had mentioned that I was ahead of the series in terms of the manga, and in some ways I still am, but in other ways I'm not, because I think they might be reordering events post a point here in Season 3, such that there's already little bits of pieces of information that I've learned that I did not know from the manga. And it's really neat because one of the nice things about Attack on Titan is you can consider this like the opposite of the problem I had with Lost. With Lost, it sets up all these mysteries, and then all the series seems to be able to do is to come up with more mysteries. Or at least that's how it felt to me, just kind of watching it here and there near the beginning. It's like it seemed kind of interesting, but then it's like you eventually reach a point where you just kind of realize that the writers write mysteries not because they have something that they're playing, but because they just like writing mysteries, and there's a pointlessness to it, and eventually that pointlessness just weighs you down. And I felt like, you know, again, I didn't watch Prometheus, but it felt like Prometheus kind of suffered from the same sort of thing. Where I thought there was a writer from Lost, but you know, I could be just attributing that to Prometheus just because I heard there was a writer from Lost on there, and there may be a preconceived bias there. But if you contrast that with Attack on Titan, when you have reveals, the series will often point out how it actually was hinting at that sort of possibility earlier, you just didn't see it. And other times, it doesn't tell you about this stuff. You just go back and you watch it and you're like, oh, they have been hinting at this the whole time. You know, they're not going, hey, psst, by the way, secret. It just happens, and then you kind of realize later, it's like, oh, was that girl hitting on me? Oh, fuck, I should have asked her out. You know, Attack on Titan kind of has that going for it, where you feel like there's all these mysteries and there's these things that happen, but then later events only help you understand more. And it's my understanding that the original author does have a plan, and he does have plans when specific pieces of information are supposed to come out. And as far as I can tell, you know, everything I had seen for the first time going into, you know, the contents as far as here and as far into the manga as I've read, it seemed pretty well executed, where it wasn't immediately obvious, oh yeah. We kind of have ideas, but you're like, well, how does that make sense? Does any of that make sense? And it's only afterwards that you're like, you start putting things together and you're like, oh yeah, that stuff makes sense. Anyways, I don't want to comment too much about that just because I might say more than I intend to. But, you know, Attack on Titan as a series is kind of really nice like that. But the next series I'm talking to, some parts of it vaguely remind me of early parts of Attack on Titan. So, I mentioned The Promised Neverland as being kind of an interesting one. This is the one that I'm like, okay, Release of Spyce isn't quite doing it for me. I want to check out The Promised Neverland. And I thought this was pretty good. If it was just this one season, I'd say actually it would be just fine. I'm a bit worried about the fact that there is a season 2, just because, or at least maybe there's plans for season 2. I don't know if it's actually aired yet. It sounds like it, if it does happen, it comes out this year. But, or maybe it already came out. I don't know. Maybe coronavirus delays it all. I don't know. All I know is season 1 ends at a place where you're like, you want to know more, but you don't need to know more. It's a place where you can actually be satisfied with where it is. But it sounds like they do want to expand on the universe a bit, and I don't know exactly what that means. And again, you know, I'm kind of worried about what that does. But the basic premise of this show actually kind of reminds me a little bit of Attack on Titan. Now, this isn't completely Attack on Titan. They're not one-to-one comparisons, but there's an element of Attack on Titan where you kind of feel this fear of being hunted, I guess. And The Promised Neverland, you know, is kind of similar in that it presents things as if things are happy, but then you know, you have people and they're like doomed to a superior force to eventually just be eaten. And Attack on Titan does that with Titans, and The Promised Neverland does that in the first episode and through the series, of course, by having our main cast, the characters, be kids who are, you know, they don't have the stature necessary to necessarily... Did I just repeat myself? They don't have the stature to necessarily take things on, per se. There's some risk of how naive they might be, how well they understand the world, etc. But basically, the two oldest characters in this group kind of find out that, oh, they're on a human farm for demons or something like that. And I have to say, or something like that, because I don't think we ever get a complete picture, only kind of confirmation denial of the ideas that they have. And there's nothing in there to actually go against the idea that it's a human farm for demons. I mean, we literally see demons in the first episode. It's actually very effective. But, you know, they're basically still trapped, trying to figure out how to not get eaten, I guess. It's not quite as Attack on Titan as being in your face, but you can... It is a lot like Attack on Titan in terms of you can feel that omnipresent dirtiness of fear, I guess. But Attack on Titan's also very action-oriented and also a bit more... At least Attack on Titan begins a lot more doomed feeling, I guess. Dreadful, maybe. Maybe hopelessness. And The Promised Neverland isn't quite any of that. So basically, there's just this similar sense of being hunted kind of going on. And kind of a helplessness that goes along with the nature of being hunted in this way. And they're very interestingly... It's interesting to compare them in this way. Now, that said, Attack on Titan's obviously grown... It grows well beyond that because it kind of uses that to set up a scenario, and then it goes out of that scenario into building a world. Whereas The Promised Neverland, as of the first season, hasn't done world building so much as, you know, ideas of world. Like, you don't feel like you need the world building that much because our characters are essentially trapped on this farm. And I call it a farm because I don't know what else to call it, because it's kind of like this mansion where a bunch of kids live and there's just a mom taking care of them. You know, it seems more like an orphanage, but it's not actually an orphanage, and it's never called an orphanage, so then you could just call it a home for a bunch of kids who don't realize they don't have a dad, I guess. But anyways, it ends in a way where you could learn more about the world, but if it didn't expand on that, it's actually a really good one-off standalone story. So, I don't know. I guess I'm just repeating myself by saying I'm a little worried about season 2, but I thought season 1 was pretty good. I could see maybe some complaint being leveled at it as people maybe thinking that it portrays kids as too smart. And I'm not sure, because sometimes I think that we forget how much of little grown-ups kids actually already are, and we do it really, really badly. Like, we think, and you can actually kind of see some of this growing disconnect from reality happening. Well, at least you could when you had people arguing that drinking age should be raised. College students should be treated as if they're still kids. It's stupid stuff because it's based on the idea that, oh, they do some stupid stuff. And the reason they do stupid stuff is because they haven't learned not to do it, basically. So we're basically taking people, we're not training them, we're not giving them a chance to learn not to do certain stupid stuff. And then when they do it, we're like, oh, well, I guess we should consider them children for even older, until they're even older. And we should go the other direction. You know, kids, of course, they don't have a very complete picture of the world as we know it. But we do, I think we do a great disservice to our kids by kind of putting them in public school, to be honest, because the public school system, as it's designed, isn't really designed to produce people to go out into the world. Like, there's a lot of valuable things to learn in there, but some of it is just the idea of, oh, well, we want these kids to learn these things so they know these things so they go to college and continue on. And there's some ideas there that are good, but at the same time, we're essentially taking kids, we're removing them from all concept of consequences from actually living in the real world in order to do this. And as a consequence, is it any surprise that they don't learn anything? We even kind of start learning, oh yes, kids of the same age should interact with each other, which, you know, kind of starts discouraging this bleed down of knowledge from the older generations to the younger ones, to the point where it's no surprise that sometimes kids in schools can act out in ways that are kind of tribal-esque, I guess, for lack of better words, because they're living in an environment where they have some day-to-day stuff that doesn't really reflect what their life is going to be like when they're outside of school, and they're being shielded from actually being part of the world, so they kind of are going to be more likely to fall back on certain human instincts to in how we group together. And I don't know. Basically, I'm saying we look at 11-year-olds not knowing much about the world, when it's not very fair to do that when we completely isolate them from it so that they can't learn anything about it. We had younger generations who were starting families at, what, 12, 13, I don't know. Surprisingly really young. And maybe that's not ideal, but at the same time, we're at the complete opposite extreme of that, and forgetting that, you know, just because they're young doesn't mean that they can't know this stuff. And in this show, I think, I don't think it's like saying anything about that sort of subject in general, but I do think it's tricky to say if the kids are really too smart, because a lot of the idea is to try and train these kids up, try to make them smart. And I think they're too smart for their situation, because I don't think they have the exposure to a wide enough variety of ideas in order to come up with some of the inferences that they do, at least from what we're given, but that doesn't necessarily mean it wasn't there. And it's weird. I know my entire conversation about the school stuff is weird too as well, And the truth of the matter is, I'm not quite sure if we can fix it by everybody saying, okay, yeah, let's not do it. Because there's the other aspect to it where the reason things like homeschooling tends to work is because the kids are kind of given access to enough of the real world to kind of be more practical there. And a lot of stuff we tend to learn in school, it's not unusual for it to go in one ear or out the other, and so people just get tired of getting all this information forced in them. It's my understanding that's why homeschooled students tend to do much better in college. They hit the ground running, whereas everybody else who went through public school system, usually they're out of high school, they're completely fucking exhausted because they've been going to public institutions for learning for 12 years. Maybe college is a breath of fresh air. Maybe they found their way in life and are really good students, but tendencies, I mean, it's also possible there's also a correlations, not causation thing, where it's also possible that people who pick things up naturally much easier would have kids who have that. And that would be a kind of either a genetic idea where maybe there is something in the genes that make it where people are more likely to pick up information. Maybe it's like autistic genes or something like that. Or on the other hand, it's also possible that the parents already kind of have the right sort of mindset and rhythm that if the kids pick that up, then they tend to do just fine on their own as well. It's all weird, and I'm not pretending to have answers, but I just know that sometimes it feels like we take for granted just how smart our kids are when they're little humans, and at a certain point, even though they don't have as much wisdom, they do have just as much ability to figure things out. Their brains are actually already kind of the right size. And I don't know why I went off on that tangent. Let's talk about something else. Wise Man's Grandchild. I decided to put this one in because I was kind of curious, and I was surprised to find out it's an isekai. Although it is interesting because as far as isekai go, it's one of the less isekais without not being not isekai. I don't think I said that correctly. What I mean is, the basic premise is actually similar to Resurrected as a Slime, or My Life as a Slime. I forget which it is actually specifically called. The character dies, he gets resurrected as a slime, all the fun stuff happens there. In this one, the main character is just kind of going through his day-to-day life. He's just kind of fine with being zoned out, but he zones out a little too much. He walks into the street during a do not cross, gets hit by a car, dies, and he's resurrected as a baby in the world of magic. Now, what makes that one slightly different, already that kind of maybe sounds similar to Saga of Tanya the Evil, where he was resurrected as a young girl, and there's memories of the past life, but he was still the same person, just now in the body of a young girl, and that's a lot more experienced and conniving than would initially be thought of for a character like that. Whereas this one, he kind of just mentions, like 8 years later, that he kind of remembers his past life, but he doesn't really talk about it, doesn't really think about it. Instead, there's that one line, and then there's these little implications that some of his thought processes are affected by ideas from a normal world, especially in regards to his approach to magic, but it doesn't really outright state that. So in that regard, it's not very isekai, but it still follows many of the same tropes of an isekai power fantasy where he is abnormally strong. Now, it's not entirely made clear if his strength comes from being the special one born, or if it's because of the way he has applied some of his ideas from here, because his physical fighting skills are also kind of set up as pretty good. He trained with some pretty notable people that he just kind of considered his aunts and uncles and stuff like that. So it's hard to say if he's just in an isekai and he's just really, he was just blessed with unusual luck and he's really great, doing great, or if he was blessed with just having more ideas and knowledge and maybe a fresh perspective, being a, just kind of remembering a previous life and just starting a new life. It's sort of like sometimes you can start a new job, and if you're at your previous job you were extremely introverted and you kept to yourself, then you start a new job, you're with a bunch of people that don't have predefined expectations of you. Sometimes you can just choose to change. You can interact with people more, go out more, talk to people more, you know, kind of just change how you interact with people. I have a friend that did that, and maybe there's something like that going on here, but the show doesn't really tell us. So it's kind of at this weird place where you're not sure what to think about a lot of that stuff, because you can't quite tell if you feel like his powers are deserved or if he's just a Gary Stu stand-in for, he's pretty awesome. But what makes it not so bad in that regard, some of the things it does that are really neat. Some of the magic ideas actually work out really well. I don't know if I want to talk about any specific ideas in particular. Some of them are just eye-rolling. Yeah, of course, he's the chosen one. I mean, they don't call him the chosen one, but for us, the viewers, we know he's pretty much chosen one or whatever. He's the one that will figure out all the new magical stuff and all that cool stuff. And in that regard, I would say that the regular Magic High actually comes off as a better standout in that regard. So in terms of power fantasy comparisons, that one nails that part better, but there's still neat aspects to it, and I really wish I could talk about the example that came to mind. That's like, I kind of really like the way that specific magical spell was really implemented, because it really did feel like a combination of things coming together. But unfortunately, it's far enough in that I don't want to talk about it. I'm just going to say that it is in there. And the other interesting thing about it is actually the group of people that forms around them. So it is not very uncommon in power fantasy shows, and isekai power fantasies in particular, for the main character to develop a harem around them. In fact, a regular Magic High was all about the guy developing a harem around him. And it's not uncommon for that harem to also have a couple of guys that are needed for some reason or the other. Mostly because, you know, you need a little more testosterone to offset that huge amount of estrogen. Because if you're not careful, then you end up with a complete rom-com where the main character doesn't have breathing space and doesn't have other male characters for us to validate and say, yeah, these other guys are cool. So the fact that he's hanging out with them means he's cool too, right? Anyways, for this one, it's interesting because this group of people that forms around him it feels like the least harem-y thing that could be, other than if it was all guys, and in which case it would probably be a harem. It would just be a reverse harem sort of thing, if only for a potential female viewer, I guess. I don't know. Basically what I mean is you have a bunch of guys and girls surrounding him, but most of their interactions don't necessarily seem to be with him. They seem to be with each other. Which isn't to say that he's just kind of there and invisible. He seems to come off more as the cool guy that everybody likes to hang out around, but unlike most Gary Stews, he's not the center of their universe. He's kind of the center of their leadership and training, but when it comes to interactions, they interact with each other a whole lot more than you're used to. And one of the things really signifying this is it establishes fairly early on that there is one specific girl that likes him, and she's the one, or there's one girl that likes him and he likes her, and their awkward romance, which is awkward and maybe you'd find it endearing or just kind of pukey, it kind of was on the edge of both for me, I guess. But they established that, and there isn't really any competition within the group centered around that. There's this guy that's jealous that she likes him and that he's looking out for her, but that is actually a part of the story and not part of the drama, if that makes sense. And it was really hard to tell because it was kind of playing off anywhere in the middle as a power fantasy, but given where they went with that, it was definitely more story than drama, if that makes sense. And so you got that, and it's interesting because when he rescued her for the first time from just some street ruffians, there were two of the girls together, but they kind of clicked but didn't communicate. But the other girl there was just kind of, oh yeah, that was great, and they just kind of had a natural interaction, and it wasn't being set up so that she's like his second girl or anything like that. She's just kind of there as a friend to the other girl, and so it's not like it's weird. And again, you know, he kind of has a closer relationship with another guy than he does with a lot of the girls in there, and it's not played off as that guy being the butt of jokes. It's just kind of played off as that guy. It's kind of played off the same energy that was he was trained by all these really great people that he just knew as aunt and uncle and all that stuff. So it's kind of playing off that energy a bit more, but more poking fun at each other, friendly, bantery sort of stuff, and there's a kind of close-knitness there that works. You have another girl that is introduced to call him Big Brother, but she isn't completely hanging off him all the time after she's introduced or anything like that. It's just sort of this thing where it's more like a game that she's playing. Not exactly playing with him, but more like, you know, oh, if my real brother isn't going to be nice to me, then I'll call this guy brother because he is nice to me and I do appreciate him. And it's important there because it's not like she is enamored with him. She appreciates him. She really feels comforted and protected in certain circumstances, and otherwise she is just looking for him for kind of excuses to get away with stuff here and there, maybe. You know, it's a very subtle distinction, but again, the entire group dynamic is kind of like this, and while he's important there for kind of giving instructions, ideas, and for them to go, holy shit, that was pretty awesome, you're pretty awesome, that doesn't seem to be the only thing that they think about and talk about. You know, it's weird in a good way. Anyways, I kind of knew this one would have a lot of interesting things. One thing I keep forgetting, it's Wise Man's Grandchild, and I really do like the little one-off moments that happen between our main character and the Wise Man, his grandfather. Adoptive grandfather, but grandfather. Because it's kind of like they didn't just create the character to say, oh, he's making the main character great. There's also little moments in there where it's just like, you know, they're almost like father, son, except, you know, since they're a generation apart, in theory, because of age, not an actual, because he's more of an adoptive father than he is an adoptive grandfather. He just refers to the character as his grandson because, I guess, of the age difference, but their interactions are kind of more, it goes a little more both ways than you would think, and it's kind of homely and endearing. And, you know, he kind of has these nice little moments of interaction with other characters, but it's mostly him and his grandfather that are really, they're an interesting spice to the show, I guess. I don't know, a seasoning to the show, I guess. It's not the main flavor. You're not going to see a whole lot of it. There'll be little bits of it here and there, though, and you're like, I like that that's in there. So, you know, overall I watch it. I think this is only a first season. If there's more to it, I guess I'll see it. But story-wise, well, I'm curious. The show leans a little more heavily on the isekai power fantasy stuff than a lot of my talk about how it kind of circumvents the tropes somewhat would suggest. Anyways, last but not least, Dragon Ball Super Part 10. So, only about like an hour of it. So basically, because I got together with my friend, we're not spending a lot of time eating food at restaurants, so of course that time is spent here. We got through the second disc of Attack on Titan Season 3 Part 2 because there was only, what, 5 episodes on it? So we watched a couple episodes of Dragon Ball Super Part 10. And some interesting stuff, but I don't think there's anything too notable to talk about. I am really ready for the Tournament of Power to be over. Not as ready as I was for the previous story arc to end, because there were things about that were neat, but there were other things that were dragging on there just like, no, please, please, please. So, I don't know what'll happen when this is all said and done. But we're at least getting here, and we're probably pretty close to the end of the Tournament of Power. I say that just because... And pretty close means that I wouldn't be surprised if it ends on here, but probably there are reasons why it might not end. Because even though there's only 13 minutes left, well, I think 5 episodes ago there were 25 minutes left. So that probably means that there's something like 10 episodes left, which may be about what we have left on here, which is why I'm kind of hopeful that we might reach the end, but there's not a linear correlation, and at the same time, there's a question of how much of the remaining battles could actually be notable in regard to this. Anyways, I don't know, looking forward to that ending. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure what my streaming tonight is going to be about. Last week, my brother called for an off week, and so that's why I just lazed around and played Pokemon for anybody that came and watched. I don't even know if anybody did. I haven't tried talking to him yet today, because work. Not that I'm like overbooked, but there's still plenty of work to do at work, which is good. I'm not running out of work while working remotely. But yeah, I have to figure tonight out, and it's not impossible that there will be more Pokemon. But given the rate, you know, how long it takes for these videos to process and then to upload, I guess y'all will probably know by the time y'all see this. I'm sorry to say that, because, you know, it's hard to record these videos earlier. But I can finish this video now, because at this point I am just babbling. Y'all have a nice week, and if I don't get any anime DVDs within this next week because Amazon isn't shipping them, then yeah, I'll figure something out. So yeah, have a nice week.